Welcome to Climbing Angel Publishing's Meet the Author. Your host is Lisa Soland.
Welcome. That's my first word out here. I've already thanked you, but thank you so much for being here tonight. This event is the debut of many events like this to come. That's my hope. It's called a Meet the Author event in the hub on the campus of West Park Baptist Church. And we are now streaming live, hopefully, on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you to all of you for venturing out today. I told some people earlier, I now know how much I'm loved. When people will come out during a pandemic. So it's really special that you're here, each and every one of you. Thank you so much. Kathy and Vicki, you guys and your husbands have come to many of my shows, but this is a little different in the world as it is. So thank you, and thank you to the internet audience for joining us out there. As you all know, my name is Lisa Soland. I work as a senior editor at Climbing Angel Publishing, and I want to talk with you a little bit about that company. I want to thank first, though, Stefan Holt for helping me tonight, along with his children, Christian and James, who are great helpers. James, thank you. Christian, thank you. Also, I want to thank Gail and her husband, Rick, for ushering tonight. They were greeting people at the door as they came in. And Tanya Hobbs for helping. She'll be helping afterwards for those of you who maybe want to purchase the books. Also, this is really important. Cedar Brook Outreach is a great ministry here at West Park Baptist Church. They minister to the community around in the perimeter of the church, to those families that are at risk. All of these Angel and Moose books are donated to Cedar Brook, completely. 100% of the donations you make for those books tonight is going to them. So if you don't have any money, a quarter is fantastic. Any amount is fantastic. Whatever that amount is, we're giving it to Cedar Brook, and those books are free. Some of you might know an underprivileged family or somebody who might not be getting very many presents, and a book is just a wonderful gift to give. Tanya will be helping you with that, and also with the other books that are published by Climbing Angel Publishing. Okay, any purchase you make, we did that. Also, well, I'll talk about Sam's book in a minute. But when you buy a Climbing Angel Publishing book, you basically support us to continue publishing family-friendly, inspirational children and adult books. And those books are being distributed around the world. Two of the books I'm going to be reading to you tonight were inspired by two sermons that were shared here at West Park. One sermon was delivered by Fred Blevins on Mother's Day, and the other by Sam Olson. This will be the main portion of this evening, but before we get to that, I'm going to go over a little bit about Climbing Angel Publishing and tell you what we've been up to. I know many of you know Climbing Angel because we publish Pastor Sam's books, and now he's got 5, but there's some other stuff I wanted to talk about too. The company was started in April of 2015, and our mission statement, I think, is a little profound. It's remained the same. Listen to this. Climbing Angel Publishing exists for the purpose of sharing stories of hope and encouragement, aiding in the gathering together of community. What a blessing it is to be here tonight with all the challenges that we have, this little community, right? And supporting the process of betterment. So this year, being COVID, some of you might know my play, Sergeant York. Many of you have seen it. All our productions were canceled for this year. So I had a lot of time and I was at home. Climbing Angel Publishing published 15 books this year. Almost, thank you. equal to all the other books combined. So I just wanted to talk with you a little bit about what we did this year alone. This is a book called Art and Dottie, and it's paired with this book called Art Bushing. And I want to thank Tanya Hobbs again for helping me type out those letters. She helped me type this. It's kind of remarkable, and we had such a good time. These books are written primarily by Art Bushing. He was the son of Alvin York's personal assistant. That's how I came to meet Dottie. She's now 100 years old, and these books are amazing. Art Bushing was a Christian, and he signed up. He wasn't drafted because his father was on the draft board along with Alvin York. And he signed up and ended up, as hard as he tried, he ended up going and actually fighting on the battlefield. He was in Patton's Third Army, and he met Eisenhower on the battlefield, which is really amazing. But the thing that I noticed primarily about the letters is that there's so much heart in them, and they're constantly praying for each other. Prayer, talking about God, how God's hand is in this, and it was very edifying, wasn't it? Really edifying. These books are available online, but you can get them here tonight as well. The third book we did this year was this book called The Sent One. This is a Romanian book written by a pastor in Indiana. Sound familiar? His name is Stan Johnson. And what's cool about this book is we printed a bunch of them. They were printed in London and sent directly to Romania, where they ministered to 4 separate cities and communities of Christians. So this was really exciting to work on. And this too you can buy online if you speak Romanian. And then the next 2 books that we published are these 2, The Truth About God's Rainbow and God's Promises. And this is the children's version, and this is the adult version. And there's only 2 or 3 pages at the end that are different. And it's just a story about Noah's Ark and the truth about that as it is spoken in Scripture. And then what the rainbow really means. So those are fun books, good books. And then we did, but we'll get to that in a second. God's Hands and Feet, which I'm sharing with you tonight. The Boy in the Bagel Necklace. And a couple of months ago, I started an online children's book writing workshop. And I have 9 excellent people working with me. And this is the first book to be published out of that group. It's called I Like to Be Quiet by Joni Caldwell. And it's a very sweet book about a girl that's in a loud family, and she happens to be quiet, and how the family likes her anyway and accepts her for what she is. And it's funny, Joni's finding out that there's a lot of this happening in families where one happens to be quieter than the others. So that book's doing really well. And then we have this next book by my friend Carly Sommier. She wrote a book called Wheels Off. And this book deals with bullying in a very lovely way. I highly recommend it. It's not in yet. It hasn't come in, though it's available on the internet. Interesting, the publisher doesn't have it yet, but other people are getting it. But it's a wonderful book, and it's also about when you get to that age where those training wheels come off of your bike. So this last book here is the 15th to be published, and it was written. It's Sam Polson's 5th book, and would you like to come up and read from the back of the book, or would you rather me do it? Okay, I thought maybe. All right. It's a wonderful book. It looks small, but we did it that size on purpose. There's actually 5 very substantial chapters in it. And I just have a thing about stocking stuffers. I can never find stocking stuffers that are substantial and worthwhile to purchase. And I think this is a really great gift for everybody. because you can keep it in your back pocket too, you can keep it in your purse, and if you get afraid, it's always right there and it can help you refocus. But let me just read you a lovely quote from the back. When we are quiet in God's presence, we can discern his voice. We can't just rush through the Bible and then rush through prayer just before we rush out the door and expect that we are going to clearly hear God's voice in a profound and personal way. God is not in a hurry, and he will not allow us to rush or hurry him. He loves us too much to do that. And then here's a second quote. Through prayer, the invisible God becomes visible to our souls as we experience incredible and infinite expressions of his glory. This book is both poetic and profound in its simplicity, both in one book. I have to tell you, it's the 5th book that I've helped with Sam, and they change my life as I work on them. And they're easy for me to promote because I believe in them. So thank you, Sam. He's one of the authors sitting in the front row. I also wanted to introduce a couple of other authors tonight. We have Teresa Shepard. She's in the front row here. She's just finished another new book. And then Tanya Hobbs sitting beside her. Climbing Angel will be publishing her book next year, and the working title is The Treasure Within. Tanya Hobbs. So be ready for that. Also, Gail Green. Gail, if you would just give a wave so people can talk with you maybe afterwards. Gail, I don't know why I can't remember your title. Tell me what it is. It's a picture book.
Because You Are Mine.
Because You Are Mine. And her daughter is an artist, and she's doing the illustrations, and it's the sweetest book. And she wrote 2 books in 4 months. Okay? These are hardworking writers. The second book's working title is The Rat's Race, and that will probably be published in the second half of next year. So Climbing Angel Publishing is doing a lot of really exciting things. So I just wanted to just let you know some of the stuff that's going on before I do the actual reading. Make sure I introduced everybody. Great. So I wanted to read 2 books to you tonight, and talk a little bit about a couple of ideas that have been going on in my head. One of them is this. When you're an artist, or particularly a writer, you want so much for people to read your work because they will know you better. They will know me more if they read my work. And it's so humbling when they do. I'm very joyful when they purchase my books and read them. And just because of that, I have a little bit, I think about God and the Bible. And I think how he must feel. He wants so much to be known. I can't even, of course, I'm not even close to fully understanding what that is about, but I do know kind of what that's like. And I do know that all of us want to be known, you know? And if I were to visit your workplaces, I would know a little bit more about you too. But I think that when I go to the Bible, I realize as I'm reading it that this is the book that God wrote, and he wrote it so that he could be more known by us. The other thing about writing I wanted to share tonight that I think is really interesting is where ideas actually come from. So this book here is the first book that I'll be reading. I was sitting in church, and Fred Blevins was preaching. It was on Mother's Day. And he mentioned a little sub-story within his sermon. And it just kind of stuck in my head. And one day I was on Facebook, and I noticed a posting from my niece. Her son, by the name of Gareth Brookshire, felt compassion for us, for all people, for all of humanity, being isolated. So he created cards, greeting cards, and he drew pictures. And they were sending out these cards to people that were hurting more than the rest of us, a little bit, more, needed a little something extra. And I noticed that he was doing this, and I thought, wow, he's got a heart for ministry. So I thought it would be really cool if I maybe wrote him something. I just, I'll write something and, maybe it'll do something, and then maybe he can draw some pictures to go along with it. See, this is how these things begin. That's why it's super important if you know an artist, or anybody really, but we're talking about writing, so writers. If you know a writer and they're in those beginning stages of creating something, support them, even if it looks messy, because it usually does. So anyway, I thought to myself, I have this morning free. I'm going to just see what happens. So Fred Blevins' sermon popped into my head, and I went back and I listened to the sermon again. And then in 2 hours, I wrote the story, read it to my husband, called the church and got Fred's number, called Fred and read it to Fred. So that's how this, and then I had the nerve to get it illustrated by my little nephew. So he's done a wonderful job, which you will see. So we'll begin. It's a short book. We'll begin with this one. Everybody good? Okay. God's Hands and Feet. This story is dedicated to Fred and his good and kind mother. My mother is good and kind. Out of all the helpful things I've learned about real life from all sorts of people, my mother has taught me the most. Every night, my mother tucks me into bed and tells me, Fred, you are one of God's very important ambassadors. What's that mean, Mother? It means that you are being set apart for His purposes. Purposes like what? You are to be God's hands and feet, because when He wants to do something good in this world, He sometimes uses us to do it. She then kisses me goodnight and turns out the light, and I go to sleep with that on my mind. My mother and father take us boys places, fun places sometimes, but most of our free time is spent visiting people who need something good from God. Sick people, people who can't get out of the house to buy things they really need, and people who are in the most trouble of all, people who have lost hope. These sick people lie in their beds, sad and unable to move, and my mother sits beside them. She reminds them that God has a great plan, and they are an important part of that plan. My mother stays there for a long time, much longer than I could. She sits and listens. Then from time to time she'll say, remember now, you are here for a reason. And the hopeless person gets breathing easier again. By the time we leave, the sick person has a much happier look on their face, and sometimes they even get out of bed and walk us to the front door. My brothers and I are encouraged to make friends with children who have no friends. We are also taught the value of befriending those who don't have as many nice things as we do. There was this boy in my class, and his name was Wayne. He did not have a winter coat, not one. It doesn't matter in the summer, but this was winter, and it was freezing cold outside. I often wondered, how did Wayne do it? How could he walk out his front door every day into the freezing cold of winter with icicles falling from the roof and not wear some sort of heavy jacket? But Wayne had nothing, nothing at all to keep him warm. One Christmas, I got an amazing brand new winter coat. And when our Christmas break was over, I wore that new coat to school, proudly displaying it for all to see. I felt like $1 million wearing that coat. Every morning before school and every afternoon when school was over, I couldn't wait to push my arms through the sleeves of that new coat and button it up. It fit me perfectly, like it had been made exactly for me. Every day I would arrive at school and hang up my new coat on one of the 27 hooks that lined the wall of our 7th grade classroom. Then, like clockwork, Wayne would come over, remove my coat from its hook, and wear it during class. But not just one class, every class, all through the day, every single day. Wayne would wear my brand new amazing Christmas coat every single day. I wore it to and from, he wore it all day. I didn't mind so much, really. In fact, I felt a little bad for the guy not having a coat of his own. My mother says that feeling bad for others is good. It's a sign of compassion. And feeling compassion is a good thing. But doing compassionate acts for others is far better than a feeling. Every day when school was over, I'd have to ask Wayne for my new coat back. Hey, Wayne. Hey, Fred. It's time to go. Yeah. I need my coat back now. Yeah. I know. He would then take off my coat and sadly hand it back to me. I'm telling you, I hated that part of the day. Hated it. Not sure why, but asking Wayne for my own coat back was the least fun part of my entire day. And I had to do it every day. One night after dinner, I pulled my mother aside and explained to her about what had been going on in school with Wayne. I guess I was hoping for her to show me some compassion. But she said something I never expected her to say, ever. She said, Fred, tomorrow I want you to give that precious little boy your new coat. What? Listen, son. Tomorrow, when school is over, and it's time for all of you children to return to your families, I want you to let Wayne keep your coat. But Mom, what will I wear? She walked over to the hall closet and pulled out my old winter coat and said, you'll wear this, Fred. It still fits you fine, and it will keep you plenty warm. You give that precious boy your new coat. How about I give him my old coat? I asked. My old coat could keep him plenty warm, too. He doesn't want your old coat. He wants your new one. I was confused. My mother had given me that coat, and now she's telling me to give it to someone else. I'm confused, I told her. Well, that's to be expected, Fred. Sometimes we don't fully understand the importance of giving until after we've gone ahead and done it. I love my mother, but sometimes she takes me for a loop. But there is no denying, she is good and kind, and some part of me deep down inside myself wanted to be just like her. So even though I didn't want to, I did what she said. The next day, when it came time for all us kids to go home, Wayne came over to me, and without me even asking this time, he began to take off my new coat. I said quickly, Wayne, it's yours, you can have it. I thought I'd better say it fast before I changed my mind. What? He asked, as if he was absolutely astounding at what I had said. I repeated slowly, you can have my new coat. But Christmas is over, he said. Not for God. And with that, I helped him put my new coat back on, which was now his for keeps. I even helped him button up those buttons. When he was fully dressed in my new coat, Wayne said, "Geez, Fred, I feel like $1 million." And he started to cry. I didn't know what to do at first. Then I thought, I'd better go ahead and let him, because it was freezing outside, and Wayne was starting to realize that he wasn't going to have to be cold anymore. Wayne always sat by himself on the bus. I figured he thought he wasn't good enough to sit beside any of the other boys who had lunch boxes with good food inside for them to eat at lunchtime, boys with happy faces and full stomachs, boys with coats. But not this day. On our way home from school this day, Wayne sat next to me, and we've been the best of friends ever since. When God wants to do something good, sometimes he needs us to do it. Sometimes it's hard to do good, to give up something of real value. And sometimes it's not so hard. But if God's behind it, it's always good. And something better than you can ever imagine happens because of it, like getting a lifelong best friend. Proverbs 22, verse 6. Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. The end. You know, it's funny about creativity. When I read that to Fred, you know, I didn't have all those pieces. I just knew the basic, the basic facts. And Fred said to me, that's pretty much how it went. And then he said, we even had a boy in our class named Wayne. Isn't that interesting? That's the creative process. One of the hardest things to do as a writer or artist in all of our work, really, when you're being creative and praying about what you do, is getting out of the way. Removing yourself, your own kind of personality from it and letting God work through you. That's a hard part, but worthwhile for sure. So this next book is a very special book for me. It's called The Boy in the Bagel Necklace. And this book I wrote just a couple of months ago, during COVID actually. But this book was written about 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And as much as I wanted to get it published, it just didn't happen. And sometimes that happens, and then you tell yourself, God's timing, right? And even when you know that that's right, and you're waiting on God, and then it happens, you still don't have all the pieces, you still don't really know all the answers, but that's where our faith comes in. This little book, this is a funny story. Okay, so Sam Polson was giving a sermon. Okay, this is like 6 years ago. And he told the story about this little boy that was adopted from an orphanage in Romania. And he told the story relatively briefly, and I thought, wow, that is a really cool story. So one day when I had some time, I Googled Romanian adoption, the bagel necklace, and nothing came up. I tried everything. I think I even looked at Ask Jeeves. Remember that old search engine? I tried everything, couldn't find anything. So I called Sam and I said, what's the deal with the bagel necklace thing? I've looked all over. Could you give me maybe more information that I can Google? And he said, no, that's, I can tell this, right? That's my son. That's the story about an adoption that Susan and I did. And then I went, oh my word, okay. So I didn't have to Google it. I could go to the source and find out some more information. However, I went to Sam later and said, I wrote the book, I think I should read it to you. And he said, no, we're good, we're good. I go, yeah, but I kind of would like for your blessing. And he said, artistic liberty, no problem. So I made sure that I took some liberties with the story. It's not 100% true, but the facts are true. Primarily, most of it is. I did call the person who it is about. They're here tonight. I'll introduce them after the reading. But I just want to reassure you that that person knows about it. So when you're hearing the story, you don't have to worry for him. It's okay. But neither him nor his family has heard the actual story. So it's very exciting for me to share it. The Boy in the Bagel Necklace. This book is lovingly dedicated to our friend, Stephen. I should also say it's illustrated by Sangamitri Dasgupta. She's a woman who lives in India, very talented artist. I should tell you that ahead of time so you'll know who to appreciate the illustrations. Chapter 1, The Orphanage. Hi, my name is Andrew, and I'm 7 years old. I know what you're thinking, I'm short for my age. But that's what happens when you're young and you don't get enough to eat. I grew up in an orphanage that had too many children. It's not that my parents didn't want me. Don't think that, because that will get you nowhere. My birth parents were poor, but they were smart. They knew they would make bad parents, and you have to be smart to come up with that idea. We orphans would wake up before the sun, have breakfast, and were then put into a clean room. We spent our mornings rocking back and forth. Some children would get into fights and hit each other. Some would get into fights with themselves. Some would hit themselves so hard that the people in charge would dress them in a piece of cloth that tied their arms around their little bodies so they couldn't move. For those who kept being bad, the workers would force them to swallow little pills that made them go to sleep. By lunchtime, everyone woke up, ate lunch, and did the same thing all over again until dinner. After dinner, we got cleaned up and put to bed. That's how life was. It was very orderly. Many times the people in charge were mean to us. Some of the smart kids would get together to try to stop the people in charge from hitting the other children. But it didn't work because the people in charge got meaner. There wasn't any hope. I think that's what made some of the children hit themselves, because they really wanted to hit the people in charge, but they weren't big enough to make that happen. No one ever told me about Jesus. One night, when I was asleep, a very nice man with peace on his face came to me in a dream. He told me that everything was going to be all right, and whenever I was lonely and scared, I could talk to him inside my head, quietly, so no one would know. He said that he would hear me, though, and he would listen. This man with peace on his face told me that his name was Jesus, and that he suffered too. He told me that people in charge beat him and tied his arms up so good that he couldn't move them either. And while he was hanging there on the cross, he asked his Father in heaven to forgive all the people who were ever mean to him. And then he died. But he did it all for us because he loved us very much. After this dream, I had a peaceful feeling that everything was going to be all right. Then one day, something happened to the people who were in charge of our entire country. Nicer people took it over, and we started getting visitors who wrote stories about the orphanage where we lived. They took pictures and showed them to thousands of people all over the world. Then we got lots more visitors. These visitors would walk into the crowded room where we were all rocking back and forth, point to a child who looked like he was growing, and the next thing you knew, that child would go missing. I was confused. My friend Thomas told me that these missing children were brought to another country called America, where they were killed. He said their body parts were sold for lots of money. I felt pretty lucky living in the orphanage because even though things were not safe, I got to keep all my body parts. Chapter 2, Adopted. One day, 2 visitors who couldn't stop smiling came into the crowded room and pointed at me. I got a bath and clean clothes, and the people in charge told me I was going for a train ride and I wouldn't be coming back. I thought I was going to be dragged to America, where I would have my legs cut off and sold to some rich person who didn't have any. But when I thought of the man from my dream, when I thought of Jesus, I stopped worrying about being sawed in half. These smiling people took me on a train with 6 other smiling people and 3 other children like me. The train carried us down the map to a place called Bucharest. When we got off the train, I looked around and noticed that not one person was sitting on the ground, rocking back and forth. They were doing other things, but not that. My smiling people gave me crackers shaped like fish, and I ate them until they were all gone. Then they gave me a piece of bread, and I held on to it tightly, so tightly that the bread got squished flat and hard. I ate that too. The grown-ups put on different clothes and took us children to this place where people sat around big tables and ate lots of food. We were rolled in strollers and parked beside the legs of the table. It's hard to believe, but there was so much food in the baskets that one piece of bread toppled out and onto the floor. Us 4 children jumped out of our strollers and fought over that roll, hitting each other as hard as it took. It was looking good for me, but the adults pulled us apart and put us back in our strollers. Then we were each given a clean roll from the table. The dirty roll was thrown into the garbage. Do you believe that? I wanted to run and get it out. But sometimes you just have to let things go. In the morning, my 2 smiling people told me that what we were going to do next, but I had no idea what they were saying. I told them that I did not want any of my body parts taken from me, but they didn't understand anything that I said either, so we were even. They kept handing me food, so everything was okay, so far. We got into an airplane, which I never knew existed, and stayed in there forever. I got back and forth. Whenever I stopped eating, my new parents would hand me something else to eat. I thought they were taking me to heaven, up above the clouds where Jesus and his Father lived, where no one was ever hungry. But they weren't. They were taking me to their house in America, where there was a sign hanging on the front door that read, "Welcome, Andrew." After the celebration was over, they took down the sign, folded it, and put it in a clean drawer that worked without shoving it. I thought maybe they would use that sign again when this family adopted the next Andrew, but that never happened again. I still can't figure out why they kept that sign. Chapter 3, New Dad, New Mom. My new dad talks a lot. He talks to people over the phone, he talks to people in his office, he talks to people at restaurants, and on Sunday mornings he talks to an entire room full of people who listen very closely. This is what he does for a living. He gets paid to talk. He talks all the time, except when he comes home, then he's quiet. I would talk more, but no one understands what I say. Everyone understands my new dad, but me. When my new dad goes off to work, I stay at home with my new mom. She talks too, but no one's there. Well, I'm there, but I have no idea what she's saying. Sometimes she will be in a room all by herself and talk. I have decided that talking is very important in America. I have decided that I'm going to have to learn to talk like Americans so people here understand what's going on inside my head. Maybe someday I'll have something important to say. And it is best to be ready for things like that. One time, my mom was in her closet trying on clothes that didn't fit. And she said to herself, "What in the world do we have here?" She tried to put on a pair of shoes, but her toe ran smack into a piece of bread that was hiding in there. She yanked the bread out and threw it away. Do you believe that? I do not understand this throwing food in the garbage. I tried to explain to her that I put that in there for a reason, but she just smiled at me, then hugged me and kissed me. Over the days, my new mom found lots of hiding food. But it was when she found the piece of bread shoved into the machine that shines movies onto the TV that she did something about it. She led me to a huge book on the shelf that had beautiful pictures. We turned to a section written by a man named Matthew. Couldn't believe it. There was a picture of the same very nice man with peace on his face who had visited me in a dream. I pointed to the picture and I said, "Jesus!" My mom's eyes opened very wide. She was surprised I knew him. She had no idea that Jesus was the first person to ever be nice to me. He was nice to me even before she was. But I thought he was made up. I thought he only lived in my dreams. I didn't know he was real. I didn't know he had pictures of himself in books. When Dad got home from his talking job, Mom ran to the front door and threw her arms around him like she hadn't seen him in 1,000 years. She jumped up and down. She told him about the big book. She opened it again to the picture of the man and said to me, "Andrew, who is this?" I said, "Jesus." She looked at Dad, and his jaw dropped so far open that it almost hit the floor. She said to me again, "Who is it?" I said, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." I like to say his name out loud. No one gets mad at me here in my new home. They liked hearing his name said out loud. We held each other's hands and danced in a circle, laughing and saying Jesus over and over again. Then they sang a song about how Jesus loves us because the big book tells us so. It was a very happy day. When I got into bed that night, Mom and Dad pulled the clean sheets up to my chin. They showed me how to pray by putting my two hands together. Then they prayed out loud. I shook my head no and placed a finger over my lips for them to be quiet. But they nodded their heads yes. And they said super loud, using their outside voices, "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. Amen." Lord is another one of Jesus' names. I learned he has lots of names and he answers to every single one of them. It was amazing to be able to talk out loud to the very nice man with peace on his face who told me that everything was going to be okay. And Jesus was right. Things were looking very hopeful. My mom and dad turned off the light and left the door open because, as you can imagine, I was very afraid of the dark. But here is the good news for me. I have on clean pajamas, my very own slippers beside my bed, a dresser that opens and closes without shoving it, and a brave mom and dad who smile at me most of the time. I felt like my life was beginning to turn out all right. I closed my eyes and quickly fell asleep because I knew that I had a loaf of bread in my top drawer hiding under my underwear. Chapter 4, the world's greatest invention. It was around this time I started to feel like my body parts were going to stay mine. I was also learning words that other people knew, which made sharing what was going on inside of me a whole lot easier. But for some reason, I was still always hungry. And if I wasn't hungry, I was afraid I was going to get hungry soon, and I was worried when I did there wouldn't be any food left for me. It turns out that I wrote best with my left hand, so I used that one to do everything. They wouldn't let me use that hand in the orphanage. I have no idea why. In my right hand, I held my food. If I didn't have food tightly squeezed in my right hand, I became afraid and freaked out. As long as there was food in my right hand, I was completely okay with every single thing that was going on in my life. This one particular morning, after Dad left to do his talking, Mom gave me a bagel to hold. A bagel is really good bread because it has a hole in the middle of it, which makes it easier to hold. It's also good because no matter how hard you hold it, it doesn't get any more squished than it already was. I was playing with my red truck. It has a handle on the side. When you push down this handle, everything in the back of the truck dumps onto the floor. I love playing with my truck. I would pile Dad's paper clips into the back and then dump them out. The problem was, I couldn't push down the handle with only my left hand. I needed both hands. One to hold the truck and one to push down the handle. But my right hand was already doing something extremely important. It was holding my bagel. As you can see, I had a real problem on my hands. I sat on the floor in the living room for a very long time trying to figure this out while Mom cooked us breakfast. My mom could set the table, crack the eggs into the pan, and flip them over with no problem at all because she could use both hands for everything. Things were easier for her. I could not. I was very frustrated. I became so frustrated that I stomped my feet on the ground and watched them kick beneath me. It was then that an idea popped into my head. I slipped the shoelace out of my left shoe and skipped into the kitchen. My mom flipped the hand towel over her shoulder and turned to find out what was going on with me this time. I held the shoelace up for her to see, then the bagel. She did nothing. I showed her the shoelace again, then the bagel again. A deep line formed between her two eyes. She was confused. I knew this expression of hers very well. I took the shoelace and stuck one end of it through the hole of the bagel, then pulled it through. I motioned for her to hang the bagel around my neck and tie it behind me. She smiled a big smile, then took both ends of the shoelace and did as I asked. Wow! This was the world's greatest invention of all time. From that moment on, I could use both hands for everything. I was becoming more and more like my mom and dad every day. I liked my bagel necklace. I wore it everywhere. I never took it off, not even when I slept. And I no longer needed to hide loaves of bread in my underwear drawer. As long as that bagel was around my neck when I got hungry, I did not become the crazy boy from Romania. You see, the memories of being hungry had been so deeply scratched into my brain, they weren't ever coming out. The time had come for me to move on. Now that I had my food traveling with me, I was free to go out into the world with much more confidence. My panic attacks were happening less and less. And when Sunday came, the day of the week when no one in the world worked but my dad, my parents took me to church along with them. Chapter 5, Sunday School. The only reason I let them leave me in a closed room with other children was because Jesus' picture was hanging on the wall. I also noticed that the children were not wrapped in cloth and their arms tied around them. Their arms were free and they were not rocking back and forth. They played with toys. They smiled and talked with each other, and all the while, Jesus smiled down on us. So when my parents left, I was okay with staying. The person in charge invited us to join her at the table. She had something to share from a book, and we were supposed to listen. I didn't understand everything, of course, but I understood enough. The pictures helped. The teacher explained that when Jesus walked on the earth as a man, He was so well-liked that people would swarm around him like he was a famous rock star. His friends were worried about him. They felt it was their job to protect him from overly excited people. One day, a bunch of happy children rushed toward Jesus, and his friends thought the children were going to knock him over, so they tried to hold him back. Jesus said to his friends, "No, no, no. Let the little children come to me. They're the only ones who are going to get into heaven, the easiest because they don't have a lot of suitcases to carry." I guess the older you get, the more suitcases you have. And the next thing you know, you're using all your hands and feet to carry the suitcases, and you have no hands left over to wrap around Jesus. At that moment, I felt pretty blessed. Pretty blessed indeed. I never owned a suitcase, ever. When I left the orphanage, I had only one set of clean clothes, and I was wearing them. This teacher in this Sunday school class told me that Jesus didn't own anything either. All he had were the clothes that he wore, and I have to say, he looks pretty well adjusted to me. Chapter 6, my dad's office. Fresh bagels aren't cheap. My mom had to rotate the old ones out because they got hard, rock hard. We knew they got rock hard because one time I bit into an old one and half my tooth fell off. My mom and dad had a serious talk. They decided that half a tooth wasn't a big deal because these were only my first set of teeth. One day, a brand new tooth would replace that broken one, so they weren't worried. I knew nothing of this new tooth business because I never had it happen to me before. I had to trust that what they were telling me was true. It's hard to trust when you haven't had the experience for yourself. I guess that's why I have to wear this bagel around my neck. People can tell me it's okay now, that I don't have to worry about going hungry anymore. But it doesn't take away the deep fear in my brain. I wear the bagel necklace because it reminds me that my growling stomach is not something I have to live with for long. This day was different from the others. Instead of staying home with Mom, Dad took me to work with him. I was placed in that same room with a couple of other children and a woman I did not know. But Jesus was still there, hanging on the wall. She told us a story that was hard for me to believe. She said that one day, when Jesus was walking around the world, thousands and thousands of people were following him because he was saying some important things about how we should live our lives. He was sharing with people that his Father, who lived in heaven, would be able to give them the very best life if they would only put their trust in him. They were on a hillside and had been there for a long time, so the people were getting hungry because they were away from home where there was always food. There was no food anywhere on this hillside. The people were about to leave and run home because they couldn't take it anymore. The hunger pains were too much for them to bear. Suddenly, this little boy like me walks up to Jesus and gives him his lunch. Jesus opened the sack, and inside were 5 barley bagels and 2 fish. I didn't know what got into that boy giving away his food like that. I guess he trusted Jesus or he wouldn't have been able to do it, right? Thousands of people sat down in the prickly grass, and Jesus took those bagels and fish and lifted them up into the sky, thanking God for the little boy and his kind gift. Jesus then asked his disciples to hand out the food to the starving people. And suddenly, out of nowhere, there was all this food. There was more food to eat than anyone in their right minds could ever imagine. And every single person who was there ate till they were full. Thousands and thousands of people were so stuffed, they all had to lay down and take a long nap. Then Jesus gave this little boy 12 baskets of bagels and fish for him to take home to his mom and dad. What an amazing thing to me. I still can't understand how that boy who was like me could give away his lunch, not knowing the end of the story. He didn't know anything about how God could take that little lunch and turn it into a ton of meals. I tried, but I could not get that story out of my mind. Chapter 7, The Crazy Boy from Romania. When nap time came, the new teacher said we all had to lie down on these mats. When I did, she tried to take off my bagel necklace. She said I would sleep better without it. But I said no. She wouldn't give up. She didn't know about the sleeping giant in me that turned into the crazy boy from Romania. Without my permission, she untied the shoelace from behind my head, and I went nuts. I kicked and screamed till my shoes fell off. She tried to calm me down, but it was too late. Nothing worked. Not even the picture of Jesus, who was still smiling down on me, even though I was behaving badly. I yelled for my father, and they quickly brought me to his office where all the talking takes place. They opened the door, and I ran to my dad, and he embraced me. And after I felt safe, I calmed down. I handed my dad the shoelace and the bagel that had taken a beating from me rolling around on the floor, and he tied the shoelace around my neck. He was with a large man who had a red nose that looked like a warty pumpkin. This large man sat there looking at my dad and me, but he said nothing. He was dressed in a suit with a tie and had a sack lunch with him, just like the little boy in the story with Jesus. My dad explained to the man that I was very attached to my necklace and did not want to be without it. The man reached behind him and undid a chain that had been hanging around his neck. He motioned for me to come to him. I looked at my dad, and my dad nodded to me, so I thought it would be okay. I went to the stranger, and he told me that when you love Jesus with all your heart, you don't have to worry about being hungry anymore. He said that Jesus takes care of all that, and more. He opened his hand, and in it was a cross hanging on a chain. He asked me if I knew what that was, and I said yes. That is where the people in charge tied Jesus when they were done using him all up and wanted him to die. The man said, when Jesus died on the cross, he died for everything we are afraid of. In fact, he died for your fear of not having enough to eat. So you don't have to be afraid of that anymore. Then the man draped the cross around my neck and latched it behind me. He said, now that you know this about Jesus, one day you might not have to tie this bagel necklace around your neck. I smiled at him, thinking he was completely out of his mind. He did not understand my history of when I had no food at all. If he did, he would not be talking such craziness. I walked back to my dad and took hold of his hand. I listened while the two grown-ups finished their talk. My dad asked the man, so, how long has it been now, Charlie? And the man said, 90 days, Pastor. I've gone 90 days without a single drink. I thought to myself, geez, if this man with the red nose can go 90 days without a single drink, maybe I could give up wearing my bagel necklace. Chapter 8, That Special Saturday. Talking seems easy for my dad, especially when he talks about Jesus. He spends a lot of time with Jesus, so I guess he knows a lot about him. When people ask my dad questions or come to him for help, he knows just what to say. But when it comes time for him to write down what he plans to say on Sunday mornings, well, that's a whole other matter. On these days, on the days he has to write his sermon, he stays home. He sits on the porch, arranges his pen and paper just so, and then he stares up into the sky. If no words make it onto the page, he changes how he's sitting, and then he stares at the grass. If that doesn't work, he leaves his pen and paper on the desk, lies in the hammock, and closes his eyes. And if that doesn't work, he packs up his things and leaves the house. I never knew where my dad went. He would just disappear and say he'll be back when he's finished writing or when the cows come home, whichever comes first. It was all a great mystery to me until that special Saturday. My mom wasn't able to be home with me, so when my dad tossed his pen and paper into the garbage and headed for the door, he took me with him. We drove, but not to his office at church, and not to see cows. We went to an awesome place, a place my dad says is very holy, the local donut shop. My dad likes donuts, but he really likes coffee. The donut shop has lots of both. They also have the most amazing bagel-shaped desserts ever. And anything shaped like my bagel necklace is okay with me. My dad ordered for us and we sat down. He let me taste his coffee, and I spit it out because it tasted like dirt. He ordered hot chocolate for me. Yum, yum. He got out his pen and paper. Then we waited for people to interrupt us. When I go out with my dad, the interruptions are the best part, and there are lots of interruptions. My dad knows thousands of people, and there are people he doesn't know, but they know him. My mom says that being out with my dad is like being at Grand Central Station. My dad says he gets his best, most important work done at the donut shop, but I didn't see him write a single word. So I didn't quite understand what he meant by this until that special Saturday I will never forget. Chapter 9, the final chapter, the mission field. We sat at a table like the others who weren't taking their food back to their cars. We sat there and no writing was getting done. But we were enjoying our chocolate cream-filled desserts that we told Mom would be our healthy breakfast. Dad, you're not writing. Well, son, I don't really come here to write. Why do you come here? I come here to make friends and introduce them to Jesus. Oh, so Jesus doesn't meet everyone in their dreams while they're sleeping? No, not everyone. Sometimes he meets us to introduce him. As we ate and drank our hot drinks, a man who was not dressed in clean clothes walked up to the glass door and looked inside. He then pulled out a newspaper and placed it carefully on the cold ground and sat on it. When people walked by him to enter the shop, he would talk to them and they would hand him something. I asked my dad, what did they hand in that man? Well, Andrew, I think he's without a home. So he's asking people for money so he can buy something to eat. But he's not coming in and buying anything, I said. Why don't we buy him something to eat? Well, we could. I have an envelope here with our money for the week. If you'd like, I could ask the man what he would like to eat. Okay, let's do that, I said. My dad approached the man, and through the glass I could see them talking. He then came in, ordered something, then brought it to the man. The man took the food and gobbled it up. My dad returned to our table. That was an excellent idea, Andrew. The man said thank you. He sure was hungry. I'm sure he was. Dad? Yeah. What's he gonna eat later? When we're not here, I asked. I don't know. He has no money and no home, where there is always plenty of food. What's he going to do later when his stomach is growling and there's no one to help him? I'm not sure, Andrew. I guess he's grown used to being hungry, like me, like I used to be. That's right, but now you have a nice place to live, where there will always be plenty of food, my dad reassured me. But what is he going to do later, Dad? He's going to get hungry again. I know he is. He's going to get very hungry, and there will be nothing for him to eat. I was so concerned about the man without a home that I did not notice the tears rolling down my cheeks. What does Jesus say about people like that, Dad? What does Jesus say about the poor? He says they will always be with us. There must be a reason for that. Jesus must have a reason to keep the hungry around us, where we can see them regularly. I'm sure he does, Andrew. I looked down at the bagel necklace hanging around my neck. I thought about all the comfort it had given me. But now I have this other necklace. And this other necklace reminds me of Jesus, who died on the cross and forgave everyone for being mean. And now, because Jesus is around, I don't have to worry about where my next bagel is coming from. Jesus does all that worrying for me because he loves me very much. I'll be right back, I told my dad. I walked outside and asked the homeless man straight out, "Do you know Jesus?" He shook his head no. "Okay, then you are going to need this." I took my bagel necklace off from around my neck and handed it to him. "Now, no matter what happens, you'll always know you've got something to eat close by." I turned around and there was my dad standing behind me. He took my hand and we walked back inside the donut shop. "You know, Andrew, one day we'll go back to that orphanage where your mom and I found you, and you can share that message with all those young children there. What do you think about that?" "I think that's a good idea," I said. "Dad?" "Yes." "I want to thank you for coming for me at the orphanage and choosing me to adopt, just like Jesus did." "You're welcome. And thank you, son." "For what?" "For writing my sermon for me." "You're welcome, Dad. Anytime." That is how the world was turned upside down for me when Jesus came to live inside my ribcage. I am not afraid of being hungry anymore, so I can spend all my time helping to feed other people who still are. Before we left on our trip, Mom and Dad surprised me with a brand new backpack. Nice, huh? I had 3 sets of clothes in there. 3. And Dad and I got on a plane, which was no big deal now, and we flew all the way back to Bucharest, Romania. Then we got on that same old train and took it north to the orphanage where my parents found me. And I shared bagel necklaces with all those frightened children who did not know Jesus. I explained to them what it was like to no longer be afraid. And because I was wearing my new backpack, both my arms were free to hug each and every one of them. The end. So tonight we have the boy with the bagel necklace, and I got him a little bagel necklace. So Stephen, if you wouldn't mind coming up here. I don't think many people know how incredibly courageous you are. So we just want to thank you for being your special self.
Thank you.
And here's your bagel necklace. If I can get it on you. Ah. Okay. And I got a signed book for you.
Oh, sweet. Thank you.
And one more surprise. and I saw the plain ones, and that's what I was going to get. And I thought, no, this is Stephen. I'm going to get him the everything bagels. What did you think of the story?
Oh, it's fantastic.
Did you like it?
Yep.
Thank you.
I appreciate you writing it about me.
You're very welcome. It's the least I could do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, does anybody have any questions? I thought maybe we could, don't forget the free books for any size donation whatsoever. All that money will go to Cedar Brook Outreach, and then we also have Pastor Sam's book, and he's here, so he can personalize them. And the profits from that book, proceeds, go to Cedar Brook Outreach as well. The other books, any ones you buy, will support Climbing Angel Publishing. We are a Christian publishing company and Christian friendly. So we also, have material that's for everybody. So, well, thank you. I'm so grateful for you being here. I know some of you took a little bit of a risk in coming. Thank you so much, and let me know if you need anything. Thank you. I will sign any book you bring to me. Yeah.
We hope you've enjoyed this presentation of Climbing Angel Publishing's Meet the Author. To learn more about Climbing Angel Publishing, please visit lisasoland.com. Thank you for joining us, and may God bless and keep you.